The package arrived on my birthday. Brown paper, blue ribbon, my father's handwriting after 6 years of silence. Happy birthday, kiddo. Let's start over. Inside were homemade cookies meticulously decorated from a man who'd never baked a day in his life. A man who measured love in obedience, punishment in teaspoons. I should have thrown them away. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I took the box to the stainless steel counter of my kitchen. In the restaurant industry, we don't eat. We taste. We assess. We analyze. And looking at these cookies, I wasn't seeing a father's love, I was seeing technique. They were perfect. Too perfect. The edges were uniformly golden, the result of a convection oven set to exactly 325 degrees. The icing wasn't just blue, it was royal icing, piped with a steady hand that hadn't trembled with age. I lifted one. It was heavy, dense. I smelled it. Cinnamon, nutmeg, and something else. A chemical sharpness that usually indicates a high-grade sugar substitute. My father, Richard, was a retired surgeon. He didn't do rustic. He didn't do grandma's secret recipe. He did chemistry. These weren't just cookies. They were dietary compliant masterpieces. He knew my nephew, Jackson, was diabetic. He knew my sister, Chloe, watched every gram of carbohydrate that went into her 6-year-old's body. This box wasn't just a peace offering for me, it was a demonstration of competence. It was him saying, I am the only one who can give you what you actually need. I should have walked to the trash can. I should have dumped the entire box into the compost bin and washed my hands of the grease and the memories, but I didn't. There is a trap that children of narcissists fall into. A trap as precise and dangerous as a snare. We call it normalization. It is the desperate, illogical belief that time cures cruelty. We tell ourselves that people soften with age, that the monster has retired and left a lonely old man in its place. We look at a box of cookies, and we don't see the years of silence or the psychological warfare. We see a crumb. A single crumb of affection. And because we have been starving for so long, we convince ourselves it is a feast. I convinced myself. I told myself he was trying. I told myself he remembered Jackson's condition and used his medical background to bake something safe. I don't eat sugar on my shift. It dulls the palate. So I closed the box. I retied the blue ribbon. I checked the clock. My shift ended in 20 minutes. I would drive to Chloe's house. I would give them the box. I would play the role of the good aunt, the bridge builder. I would deliver the olive branch, unaware that I was actually the delivery system for a weapon. I drove to the suburbs, the box sitting on the passenger seat like a passenger. When I arrived, Chloe was in the garden. Jackson was running through the sprinkler. He looked up, his face wet and beaming. I walked over, the box heavy in my hands. Grandpa sent a present, I said. Sugar-free. Just for you. Chloe looked at me, her eyes wide. He remembered? He remembered, I said. And I watched, smiling, as she opened the lid. The next morning, I was prepping stations for the lunch rush when my phone rang. It was Richard. Did you eat them? He asked. No hello, no happy birthday. Just that question. Sharp as a scalpel. No, I said, wiping down a cutting board. I don't eat sugar on shift. I gave them to Jackson. The silence on the other end wasn't empty, it was pressurized. Then, his voice came through, high and thin, stripped of all its usual arrogance. Induce vomiting, he said. Now, call your sister. Tell her to get him to the ER. Now, Abigail. I dropped the phone. The screen cracked against the tile floor. I didn't think. I moved. I grabbed my keys and ran. By the time I reached the hospital, it was chaos. Jackson was in a room I wasn't allowed to enter. Chloe was in the hallway, pacing, her face streaked with tears and mascara. When she saw me, she didn't run to me for comfort. She stopped. Her expression hardened into something ugly. You gave them to him, she screamed. You gave him poison. Chloe, I didn't know. Richard told me, she yelled, her voice echoing off the sterile walls. He called me. He said you knew they were bad. He said you were jealous because he sent them to me, not you. I stood there, stunned. He had spun the narrative before I even arrived. He had turned his panic into a weapon against me. Then he walked in. Richard. He was wearing a suit, looking every inch the distinguished surgeon. He walked past me without a glance and went straight to the doctors. He started barking orders, demanding charts, critiquing the IV drip rate. He wasn't a grandfather terrified for his grandson. He was a mechanic looking at a broken engine he needed to fix to avoid a lawsuit. I watched him. I watched the way his eyes didn't track Jackson's face, but the numbers on the monitors. He was calculating. He was doing math, and then I realized it. The dosage. If he had meant to kill Jackson, a 6-year-old diabetic, the amount of toxin in one cookie would have been small. But Jackson had eaten 3, and he was seizing. The toxin levels were massive. They weren't calibrated for a child. They were calibrated for a 130-pound woman. He hadn't tried to kill Jackson. He had tried to kill me, and in that moment, as Chloe sobbed into his shoulder and he patted her back with mechanical rhythm, I felt the weight of it. Not just the horror, but the guilt. There is a specific kind of hell, reserved for the survivor of family abuse. It is the moment you realize that by surviving, you have inadvertently passed the blow to someone else. You become the conduit, the lightning rod that didn't ground the charge, but deflected it into the person standing next to you. I looked at Jackson, small and pale, and fighting for air, and I knew that every ounce of pain he was feeling belonged to me. It was my inheritance. And I had re-gifted it to an innocent child. Jackson stabilized after 48 hours, but the doctors said he wasn't waking up yet. They were calling it a chemically induced coma. They had identified the substance. It wasn't just a sugar substitute. It was a derivative of a potent neuromuscular blocker, synthesized in a way that mimicked an extreme allergic reaction. It is sophisticated, the attending toxicologist told me, looking at the charts. This isn't something you buy online. This requires a lab. And access. Access. My father had retired 5 years ago, but he still had his network. He still had his friends in the pharmaceutical supply chain. Chloe wouldn't speak to me. She sat by Jackson's bed, holding his hand, her back to the door. Every time I tried to enter, she would stiffen. "Go away, Abigail," she'd whisper. "Just go away." I went to the cafeteria. I sat there for 3 hours, staring at a cup of cold coffee. I didn't cry. Crying is a biological release valve. And I didn't have any pressure left to release. I was empty. Cold. I took out my phone and called Joshua. He was a private investigator I'd used during the divorce proceedings years ago when my mother finally left Richard. He was expensive, discreet, and he didn't ask moral questions. "I need you to find something," I said. "My father tried to kill me." "Police matter," Joshua said. "The police are taking statements. They're moving at the speed of bureaucracy. I need speed. I need to know where he got the compounds. And I need to know why." "Why?" Joshua asked. "Because he's rich, Joshua. But he's not that rich. He's protecting something." I went back to work. Not to the restaurant, but to my apartment. I turned my kitchen into a war room. I started cooking. Chopping vegetables with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat, the knife hitting the board. Thud, thud, thud. It was the only way I could think. Joshua called me 2 days later. "I found a name," he said. "Patricia Vance. She was his head surgical nurse for 15 years. She retired the same year he did. She lives in Tacoma. What does she know? She knows everything, Abigail. She was also his mistress." I packed a bag. I took my best chef's knife, wrapped in a leather roll. I didn't know why. It just felt safer than a gun. I drove to Tacoma in the rain. Patricia Vance lived in a tidy bungalow with a garden full of hydrangeas that were drooping under the weight of the water. She answered the door in a cardigan, holding a cup of tea. She didn't look surprised to see me. "You have his eyes," she said. "Come in." We sat in her living room. It smelled of lavender and old paper. "Joshua told me what happened to the boy," she said. "I'm sorry. Richard always did have a problem with collateral damage." "Collateral damage?" I asked. "He poisoned a 6-year-old. "He poisoned you," she corrected. "The boy was just in the way." She went to a bookshelf and pulled out a photo album. She opened it to a page near the back. Do you recognize him? I looked. It was a picture of a boy, maybe 10 years old. He had sandy hair and a shy smile. He was standing next to a younger version of my father, who had a hand on the boy's shoulder not in affection, but in possession. Who is he? I asked. Your brother, she said. Matthew. I stared at her. I don't have a brother. I'm the oldest. You're the oldest surviving child, she said. Matthew died 20 years ago. You were 12. You wouldn't remember him because Richard made sure you didn't. He sent him away to boarding school when he was 7. Matthew had a developmental delay, nothing serious. Just a little slow with reading, a little clumsy. But to Richard, he was a blemish, an imperfection. He died? Anaphylactic shock, Patricia said. Bee sting. That was the official cause. But Matthew wasn't allergic to bees, Abigail. I knew his medical history better than anyone. I administered his vaccines. He'd been stung a dozen times before. But suddenly, one day at school, he gets stung, and his throat closes up? And Richard, the grieving father, cremates him before an autopsy can be done? She closed the album. He pruned him, she said. Like a dead branch. And now he's trying to prune you. Why me? I whispered. I'm not sick. I'm successful. I'm a chef. You're independent, she said. You cut him off. You embarrassed him. And there's the trust fund. The what? Your grandfather left a trust. $2 million. It was supposed to be split between the grandchildren. But there's a clause. If any beneficiary dies, without issue, without children, their share reverts to the surviving siblings. If all the siblings die, it reverts to the executor, your father. I felt the blood drain from my face. $2 million. He's not just an abuser, Patricia said. He's a serial killer who uses medical charts as a hit list. He killed Matthew to get his share. Now he wants yours. And he needs you dead before you have kids, or before you find out about the money. And Chloe? Chloe is the golden child, Patricia said. She's compliant, she needs him. He'll keep her alive as long as she stays obedient. But you? You're a loose end. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my mind was crystal clear. He's going to try again, I said. Yes, Patricia said. He won't stop until the ledger is balanced. Then, I need to balance it for him. I drove back to Seattle. I didn't go home. I went to the market. I bought sugar. I bought syrup. I bought a thermometer. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the head chef. And I was about to serve the final course. I drove to the Olympic Peninsula in a rental car. My Honda was too recognizable, and I didn't want him to know I was coming until I was ready. The cabin was miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a dirt road that washed out in heavy rain. It was the place where Richard used to take us for family bonding, which usually meant him lecturing us while we sat in terrified silence. I arrived 3 hours before our agreed meeting time. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the world gray and cold. Perfect. I unlocked the door. The cabin smelled of mildew and stale wood smoke. I didn't turn on the lights. I went straight to the kitchen. It was a small galley kitchen with a propane stove. I checked the tank. Full. Good. I took out my tools. The sugar, the syrup, the thermometer, the heavy-bottomed pot. I started the burner. Sugar work is dangerous. It's chemistry at high temperatures. Water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Sugar syrup boils much higher. At 320 degrees, it becomes hard crack. Above that, it becomes caramel. But it's not just sweet, it's sticky. It clings. If it touches skin, it doesn't just burn, it fuses. It keeps burning until it cools, which takes a long time. In culinary school, they call it culinary napalm. I watched the thermometer climb. 250, 280, 300. My phone rang. It was Richard. I'm 10 minutes out, he said. Are you there? I'm here, Dad, I said, letting my voice waver. I'm so scared. I don't know what to do. Just stay put, he said, his his voice soothing, paternal. "I'll take care of everything. I'll make it all go away." "Okay," I whispered. "Please hurry." I hung up. I checked the thermometer. 315 degrees. Perfect. I turned off the burner, but left the pot on the grate. It would hold its heat. I moved to the living room and sat in the armchair facing the door. I placed my knife roll on the table next to me, unrolled. The blade of my chef's knife gleamed in the dim light. I waited. 10 minutes later, headlights swept across the front window, the sound of tires crunching on gravel, the engine cutting off, the heavy footsteps on the porch. The door opened. Richard stood there, shaking his umbrella. He was wearing a raincoat and carrying a black medical bag. He looked annoyed by the weather, but otherwise calm. He looked like a man making a house call. "Abigail?" he called out, peering into the gloom. "I'm here," I said. He saw me. He smiled. That tight, practiced smile I knew so well. "Oh, look at you," he said, walking in. "You look terrible. Have you been crying?" "No," I said. "I haven't." He frowned. He closed the door behind him and locked it. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was loud in the quiet room. "Well," he said, setting his bag on the floor. "Let's get this over with. You said you messed up. What did you do?" "I didn't mess up," I said, standing up. "I solved the puzzle." He stopped. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. He saw the dryness of my eyes, the stillness of my hands. And he saw the knife on the table. "What is this?" he asked, his voice dropping. "This is the end of the line, Dad," I said. "I know about Matthew. I know about the trust. And I know you tried to kill me." His expression didn't change. He didn't deny it. He just sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "You were always so dramatic," he said, "just like your mother." "Matthew wasn't viable, Abigail. He was a drain, a genetic dead end. I did him a favor." "And me?" I asked. "Am I a dead end too?" "You're clutter," he said simply. "You're messy. You're emotional. You cut me off. You embarrassed me. And you're in the way. Chloe is perfect. She listens, she breeds well, she deserves the legacy. You're just an obstruction." He reached into his bag. He pulled out a syringe. It was already filled with a clear liquid. "This will be painless," he said, stepping toward me. "A sedative. Then a muscle relaxant. It will look like a suicide. The grieving daughter, overwhelmed by guilt after nearly killing her nephew, it writes itself." "Stay back," I said. "Or what?" he sneered. "You'll cook for me?" He lunged. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I did what a chef does when the timer goes off. I acted. I grabbed the handle of the pot. It was heavy, cast iron, radiating heat that scorched my knuckles. Inside, the sugar syrup was a clear, bubbling liquid, hotter than boiling oil, thicker than glue. Richard was fast. He covered the distance between us in 2 strides, the needle raised, his eyes fixed on my neck. He expected resistance. He expected me to grab his wrist or try to dodge. He didn't expect me to bring the kitchen to him. I swung the pot in a tight arc. I didn't aim for his face. I aimed for his center of mass, his chest and the arm holding the syringe. The liquid left the pot in a golden sheet. It hit him with a wet, heavy slap. If you pour boiling water on someone, it splashes off. It burns, but it leaves. Sugar doesn't leave. Sugar is structural. It hit his raincoat and melted instantly through the synthetic fabric. It hit the wool of his sweater and fused it to his skin. It wrapped around his right arm, a glove of liquid fire, at 315 degrees. The sound he made wasn't human. It was a high, tearing shriek that seemed to rip the air in the small cabin. He dropped the syringe. He clawed at his chest with his left hand. But that was a mistake. The syrup was still hot, still tacky. His fingers stuck to the burning mess on his torso. He tried to pull them away, and I saw the skin of his chest pull with them. He fell backward, crashing into the coffee table, writhing on the floor. He was gasping, trying to scream. But the shock had stolen his breath. I placed the empty pot back on the stove. I turned off the gas. Then I picked up my knife. I walked over to him. He was curled in a fetal position, sobbing, clutching his arm to his chest. The smell in the room was horrific, a mix of caramelized sugar, melting plastic, and scorched meat. I kicked the syringe across the room, under the sofa. "Help me," he wheezed. "Abigail. Help me." I looked down at him. I looked at the man who had killed my brother because he was imperfect. The man who had poisoned me because I was inconvenient. The man who had watched my 6-year-old nephew seize in a hospital bed and checked the monitors instead of holding his hand. "Sugar burns at a much higher temperature than water," I said. My voice was calm. "Clinical. It is called the hard crack stage. It cools very slowly." "I'm burning," he cried. "Please." "I know," I said. "I'm watching the monitors." I didn't touch him. I didn't offer him water. Water would only shock the skin and make the adherence worse. I just stood guard. I watched him writhe until the fight went out of him, until the pain forced his body into shutdown. He passed out from the shock, his breathing shallow, his expensive coat fused to his body in a glossy, amber shell. I walked to the table where he had set his medical bag. I opened it. Inside, there were vials. Labeled, organized, evidence. I took my phone out of my pocket. It was still recording. I stopped the recording and saved the file. Then, I sat in the armchair and waited for the police. Joshua arrived with the sirens. He had been waiting at the bottom of the access road, just in case. When the police entered, they found Richard screaming on the floor, the sugar syrup having cooled into a hard, amber casing that bound his arm to his chest. They took him out on a stretcher. He was ranting about ungrateful children and medical malpractice. He didn't look at me. He was too busy trying to negotiate with the paramedics about his skin grafts. I played the recording for Chloe in the hospital waiting room 2 days later. She tried to cover her ears. She tried to say it was a trick, a deep fake, a mistake. But then she heard his voice, the cold, dismissive tone he used when he thought no one was listening. "She deserves the legacy. You're just an obstruction." The golden child delusion shattered. It didn't break loudly, it just dissolved, leaving her looking very small and very old. Jackson woke up. Kids are resilient, they bounce back. But he never asked for Grandpa again. He knew. The legal process was efficient. The assault charge, the attempted murder charge, the evidence from Patricia, it was overwhelming. Richard took a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He will die in a cell, wearing a prison uniform that scratches his burns. I became the executor of the estate. I liquidated everything. The house, the cars, the investments. The blood money. I didn't keep it. Money like that has a taste, a bitterness that never washes out. I used it to seed something new. I started the Matthew Foundation, dedicated to helping children trapped in medical abuse situations. I funded a culinary scholarship for at-risk youth, teaching them that knives are tools for creation, not destruction. This is the justice of the sower. You don't just burn the weeds, you plant something that will outgrow them. Yesterday, Jackson came over. We went into the kitchen. I took out the flour, the butter, the real sugar. We made cookies. Chocolate chip. Messy, imperfect, and safe. "It smells good," he said, watching them bake. "It smells like the truth," I said. Have you ever had to protect someone you love from the person who was supposed to protect you? Share your story in the comments. And if you believe that family is about behavior, not blood, hit that like button and share this video.